My son told everyone I was dead so he could claim my property. I appeared at his court hearing. My son was under oath when he told the judge I was dead. I was standing in the room next door. Through the wall, I heard Evan say he had watched me sign the will in front of the court. I heard him explain why my apartment building needed to be sold immediately. I heard him describe a final phone call from a Spanish hospital that had never happened. He thought he was minutes away from gaining control of property worth more than $2 million. What he did not know was that I had been back in Pittsburgh for 48 hours. My lawyer had already blocked every transfer. The bank had been warned. The original will was in a sealed file, and a county detective was standing 3 feet behind me. I could have stopped the hearing before it began. I did not. I wanted my son to make one choice while he still believed there would be no consequences. I wanted him to identify my forged signature under oath. When he did, the judge asked whether anyone objected to his appointment as executor. My attorney stood. "The deceased does, Your Honor." A clerk opened the side door. I walked into the courtroom. Evan looked at me as if the dead had actually learned to walk. But that was not where this story began. 16 days earlier, I was sitting beneath a striped awning in Porto, Portugal, when I read my own obituary. My name is Thomas Mercer. I was 66 years old, in good health, and halfway through a 4-month trip through Portugal and Spain. I had spent 38 years repairing industrial electrical systems around Pittsburgh. I was not flashy. I drove a 7-year-old pickup, wore the same winter coat for more than a decade, and still sharpened drill bits instead of replacing them. But I owned 3 properties without debt. The brick house where Laura and I raised our son, a 6-unit apartment building near Carnegie, and a narrow commercial property with 2 workshops. Together, they were worth a little over $2 million. The obituary used a photograph from Laura's retirement dinner 12 years earlier. I was wearing a gray suit with one hand on the back of her chair. Someone had cropped my wife out. According to the notice, I had died peacefully during an extended trip abroad. My son requested privacy while the family settled my affairs. A private memorial had already taken place. I checked the date twice. My memorial had been 11 days earlier. At first, I thought it was some terrible clerical mistake. Evan knew I was traveling. My older sister, Judith, knew my route. My bank knew I was overseas because I had filed a travel notice. Dead men do not usually book hotels, buy train tickets, or send photographs of bad seafood to their sisters. Then I saw the condolence messages. Former co-workers had written beneath the obituary. Tenants from my apartment building had left notes. Men I had not seen in 20 years wrote about jobs we had worked together. And then I saw Judith's message. She had written that she still did not understand why Evan refused to let her see my body. That sentence changed everything. My American phone had stopped connecting 2 days earlier, so I called Judith over the hotel Wi-Fi. She answered on the 4th ring. "Judith, it's me." Nothing. Then I heard her inhale. "Tom?" "Yes." For almost 30 seconds, she did not say another word. Then she started crying. I let her cry. Finally, she said, "Evan told me you had a heart attack in Spain." I didn't. He said there was a problem with the body. He said they had to cremate you quickly. I looked at the river beyond the cafe. "Did you see a death certificate?" "No." Raymond asked too. Evan said the consulate had the original. Raymond Cole was my attorney. He had handled Laura's estate and my property documents for almost 20 years. Judith's voice dropped. "Tom, we had a memorial." "I know." "He stood in front of everyone and talked about your last conversation." That was the first moment I understood this was not a mistake. I asked one question. "Did he let you see an urn?" "No." I closed my eyes. Laura and I had purchased cemetery plots beside each other before she died. Evan had been there when I signed the papers. He knew I wanted to be buried next to her. Judith asked where I was. "Porto. I'm calling Evan right now." "No." She went quiet again. "Tom, your son thinks you're dead. That's exactly why you're not calling him." She did not like that answer. Neither did I. My sister had mourned me for almost 2 weeks. She deserved relief, not another secret. But if Evan believed I was dead, I needed to know what he was doing before he learned otherwise. I asked Judith to photograph every letter, notice, and document she had received since my supposed death. 2 hours later, my phone began filling with images. There were 42 of them. The first few were funeral papers. Then I saw a court petition. Evan had filed in Allegheny County seeking authority to administer my estate. Attached to the petition was a foreign death record and a will naming him as primary beneficiary. The will looked official. It was also not mine. My real estate plan did not leave everything to Evan. Judith and Raymond were co-executors. My granddaughter, Lily, had a trust. Evan would receive income from one apartment unit and the option to purchase my house at a favorable price, but he would never have unrestricted control of the estate. The document in front of me removed Judith. It removed Raymond. It erased Lily's trust. And at the bottom was my signature. It was a good forgery. Whoever copied it knew the long downward stroke in the T and the way my hand hesitated slightly near the end of Mercer because of arthritis in my thumb. But there was one problem. The will was dated on a day I had been in a hospital undergoing shoulder surgery. I remembered that date because I spent the night arguing with a nurse about hospital coffee. I called Judith back. "Look at the date on page 7. She did. Oh my God. I was in surgery, so he forged it. I don't know yet who forged it, but I know I didn't sign it. Then I reached the final pages of the petition. Evan was asking for emergency authority to sell my apartment building. That made no sense. The building had no mortgage. Taxes were current. The roof was only 4 years old. Occupancy was full except for one unit being repainted. Yet his filing claimed urgent repairs, tax exposure, and a buyer whose offer would expire. The buyer was Ridgeway Urban Holdings. I knew that name. My son and his business partner, Caleb Ross, operated Ridgeway Property Services. The names were close for a reason. I looked up the corporate registration. Ridgeway Urban Holdings had been formed 3 months earlier. Caleb controlled it. My building was worth around $900,000. The proposed sale price was $520,000. That was when the first question was answered. Evan had not declared me dead because he believed I was missing. He had declared me dead because he needed my property. But another question immediately replaced it. How had he built enough evidence to make a court believe him? To understand that, I had to go back several years. Evan was 37. He had always been intelligent, charming, and impatient with anything that did not reward him quickly. When he was younger, I called it ambition. Laura called it creativity. Neither of us called it what it sometimes was, a refusal to accept limits. He left college after 3 semesters. Then came automobile sales, a fitness studio, cryptocurrency, and a short-lived company that rented luxury watches for social media events. Every business began with certainty. Every failure ended with an explanation. The market changed. A partner lied. Customers did not understand the concept. The bank moved too slowly. Someone else was always standing between Evan and the success he believed belonged to him. Laura protected him longer than I did. She paid his rent twice without telling me. She covered a tax debt from part of her retirement savings. When I found out, we had the worst argument of our marriage. "He's our son," she told me. "I know. Then help him. We are helping him avoid learning anything." She hated that sentence. I hated saying it. After Laura died 5 years ago, Evan came to me again. His fitness studio was closing and he owed money on equipment leases. I agreed to help one final time. But I paid the creditors directly. At dinner, I slid the settlement papers across the table. "This comes out of what you would have inherited from me." Evan smiled as if I had told him something temporary. "Fine, Dad. You understand what I'm saying?" I said fine. He agreed too quickly. 2 years later, he and Caleb formed Ridgeway Property Services. They managed smaller apartment buildings and searched for distressed properties. One evening, Evan brought me a proposal. He wanted my 6-unit building under Ridgeway's management. "We can unlock the equity," he said. "It doesn't need unlocking." "Dad, you're sitting on almost $1 million and earning basic rent." "I'm earning enough. We refinance, renovate, raise rents, then use the capital to buy another property." 3 of my tenants had lived there more than 10 years. I shook my head. "No." Evan leaned back. "You don't understand how real estate works now. I own the building free and clear." "Exactly. That's dead money." I remember looking at him when he said that. Dead money. At the time, it sounded like a business phrase. Later, it sounded different. Our relationship became polite after that. We met for dinner about once a month because Laura had asked us, before she died, not to let pride turn us into strangers. Most of those dinners included Lily. Lily was 10 when this happened. Evan and her mother, Nicole, had divorced years earlier and shared custody, though Nicole did most of the day-to-day parenting. Lily was the reason I kept showing up. She made cards for the tenants at Christmas. She remembered the names of waitresses. If someone at a table was quiet, she noticed. Laura would have adored the young woman she was becoming. I had created a trust for Lily's education and future home. Evan knew a trust existed. He did not know the amount or all the restrictions. That trust was one of the things his forged will erased. 6 months before my supposed death, I told the family I was finally going to Europe. I had barely traveled during Laura's illness. 5 years had passed since she died, and Judith kept telling me that grief did not become loyalty just because I stayed home. Evan was unusually interested. 4 months? He asked. Approximately. Portugal and Spain? Mostly. Are you going alone? Yes, he smiled. Good for you, Dad. Send me your itinerary. Just in case, I did. That was mistake number 1. I did not give him control of the apartment building. I hired a professional manager. I gave Judith access to my house. Raymond kept the original estate documents. But I left Evan listed as an authorized person on my mobile account. Years earlier, during Laura's illness, I had added him in case I was unreachable at the hospital. I never removed him. That was mistake number 2. For the first month, the trip was exactly what I needed. Lisbon, Coimbra, Madrid. Small towns where nobody knew me and nobody needed anything from me. Evan messaged every few days. At first, the questions sounded caring. How are you feeling? Are you driving? Are you hiking alone? Are you taking boat tours? One night in Madrid, I joked to Judith that my son had become more interested in my blood pressure from 6,000 miles away than he had been across town. Then the security alert started. Someone tried to access my oldest email account, then my bank. I changed passwords and called the bank. The attempt stopped. A week later, my wallet was stolen on a crowded train near Salamanca. I canceled 2 cards immediately. My passport was secure. I had a backup card in my luggage, I told Evan because he texted that morning. 2 days later, my American phone number stopped working. I assumed it was an international service problem. It wasn't. The carrier told me an authorized person had reported my phone lost and moved the number to another device. Who authorized it? I asked. There was a pause. An Evan Mercer, my son. With my phone number, he could receive verification codes. With a copy of my passport stored at the house, he had answers to identity questions. With my itinerary, he knew where I was supposed to be. And with the stolen wallet, he had a believable reason for my accounts and phone to behave strangely. I never proved Evan arranged the theft. I will not accuse someone of what I cannot prove. What I can prove is what happened next. He gained access to my oldest email. Inside it were scanned tax returns, old property records, and correspondence with Raymond. There was also an unsigned draft of a will prepared 7 years earlier, before Lily was born and before I bought the commercial workshops. Someone altered that draft. The executor clause changed. The newer properties appeared. My signature appeared. And suddenly my son had a will that gave him almost everything. The death record was more complicated. I did not learn the full story until investigators traced it later. For now, sitting in Porto, I knew only 3 things. My son had told my family I was dead. He had filed a will I never signed. And he was trying to sell my best property to a company controlled by his business partner for hundreds of thousands below market value. I called Raymond. He answered with a tired voice. Raymond Cole. It's Thomas. Silence. Then he said, Who is this? Thomas Mercer. Another silence. That's not funny. Laura hated the yellow wallpaper in your first office, but she never told you because your wife picked it. He stopped breathing for a second. Only 3 people knew that story. Tom? Yes. My God. You attended my memorial. I did. Did Evan show you a death certificate? No. He said the consulate was holding the original. Did you see the will he filed? I saw the copy yesterday. It's false. Raymond's voice changed immediately. Grief disappeared. Lawyer returned. Where are you? Porto. Stay there. I need to come home. You will, but don't contact Evan yet. That surprised me. I was about to tell you the same thing. By that evening, Raymond had brought in Elena Voss, a former federal prosecutor who handled estate and identity fraud. We spoke by video. Elena did not waste time. Mr. Mercer, I need you to hold your passport next to your face. I did. She asked me to turn it, show the entry stamps, state the date, and read a random paragraph from the screen. Then she asked several questions about my properties. Finally, she said, I believe you are Thomas Mercer. That's reassuring. She almost smiled. Do you want us to stop the hearing immediately? No. Raymond looked at me through the screen. Tom, if we warn him now, what happens? Elena answered. He could withdraw the petition. And say what? That he received bad information. That someone else prepared the documents. That he believed you were dead. Exactly. For most of Evan's life, whenever consequences came close, there was another explanation. This time, I wanted him to choose his explanation in front of a judge. Elena understood. You want him committed to the documents. I want him to say they're real. There were risks. We could not simply sit back while he transferred property. So Raymond recorded notices against every parcel and alerted the banks and title companies. The apartment manager changed digital access codes. Judith used the authority I had already given her to remove original documents from my house. No sale could close without review. That was my hidden advantage. Evan believed he was racing a dead man. He did not know the dead man had already locked the doors. I flew back to Pittsburgh 2 days before the hearing. Raymond put me in a hotel outside the city. I did not go home. I did not call Evan. I did not tell Lily. For 48 hours, I existed as a dead man in the city where I had lived most of my life. That was when I learned how far Evan had gone. My bank accounts were flagged for a deceased customer. My pension payment was frozen. My health insurance had received notice of death. My mail had been forwarded to Evan's office. The utilities at my house had been closed and reopened in his name. Then Judith sent photographs from inside the house. Laura's jewelry was gone. My coin collection was gone. 2 firearms were gone. Financial files were missing, and the safe containing emergency cash had disappeared. I stared at the empty shelf where Laura's jewelry box had been. Judith called. "Tom, there's more." I did not want there to be more. Evan has started tagging the furniture. What do you mean? Yellow stickers? Numbers? I think he's inventorying things. She sent a photograph. My dining table had a yellow tag on it. So did Laura's piano. The house had not even been legally transferred, and my son was already pricing the life inside it. Then Nicole called Raymond. That was worse. Evan had told Lily I died suddenly in Spain and had been cremated. She had stopped sleeping alone. She carried the postcard I had mailed her from Lisbon in her school backpack because she believed it contained the last words I would ever send her. I stood at the hotel window holding the phone. "I am going to see her." Elena's answer came quickly. "Tomorrow. She's 10 years old." "I know. She thinks I'm dead. And if she calls her father tonight, the hearing collapses." I hated that she was right. One more night. That evening, I opened the obituary again. Former apprentices remembered that I stayed late to help them study. One tenant wrote that I repaired her heat on Christmas Eve without charging her. Then I read Evan's memorial message. It was the longest. He wrote that I had taught him integrity, responsibility, and the value of family. I read that line 3 times. The next morning, I shaved, put on a dark suit, and went to court. At 9:15, Elena brought me through a side entrance with a county detective. The judge had been informed less than an hour earlier. Raymond provided my passport, live identity verification, the original will, medical records from the date of the forged signature, and documents showing the properties were mine. The filing was sealed. The hearing proceeded. That mattered. Evan walked into court believing nothing had changed. He arrived with Caleb and an attorney named Peter Laird. Peter had never represented me. Based on what happened later, I believe he thought his client was presenting genuine documents. I waited in a conference room beside the courtroom. At 10, I heard the court reporter begin. The judge asked Evan his relationship to the deceased. "My father." "And you are his only surviving child?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you swear the testimony you give will be true?" "I do." I could hear the confidence in his voice. Then he explained why my apartment building had to be sold. He described urgent roof problems. There were none. He mentioned unpaid taxes. The taxes were current. He claimed the city had raised concerns about possible condemnation. The latest inspection had 2 minor violations, both corrected months earlier. Then his attorney introduced the will. The judge asked Evan whether he recognized my signature. "I do." "How?" "I was there when he signed it." Elena looked at me. That was the moment we had been waiting for. Evan had just placed himself beside a signature made while I was unconscious in a hospital. The judge continued. "Did your father discuss the document with you?" "Yes. He wanted me to handle the properties." Another lie. Then came the death certificate. Peter handed up a document with stamps and an embossed seal. From a distance, it looked impressive. The judge asked about my death. Evan told a complete story. He said a Spanish hospital called him. He said I had suffered a heart attack. He said I was frightened but calm. He said I told him to take care of Lily. Then he said I gave him instructions about the properties. I sat in the room next door listening to my son invent my final words. That was when this stopped being about money for me. The judge examined the document. "Mr. Mercer, why does this certificate omit your father's passport number?" Evan paused. "I don't know how Spanish records work, and these municipal codes appear inconsistent. Foreign documents can be confusing." Then the judge asked the question. "Does any person present object to the appointment of Evan Mercer as executor?" Raymond stood. "Yes, Your Honor." On whose behalf? Raymond looked toward the side door. The alleged deceased. The clerk opened it. I walked in. No one shouted. There was no dramatic music. The room simply became quiet. Judith covered her mouth, even though she knew I was coming. Peter stared at me, then down at the death certificate in his hand. Caleb turned toward Evan. My son did not move. For a second, he looked exactly like he had when he was 12 and broke a garage window with a baseball. Then his eyes moved toward the exit. The detective stepped into the doorway behind me. The judge looked at me. State your name. Thomas Mercer. You are the person identified as deceased in this petition? Yes, Your Honor. You are the father of the petitioner? Yes. Are you alive? A few people in the room shifted at the question. I answered anyway. Very much so. The judge held up the will. Did you sign this document? No. I did not give a speech. I did not look at Evan and tell him he had lost. I did not need to. The hearing was recessed, the exhibits were retained, the estate petition was dismissed for the simplest possible reason. The deceased had appeared in person. That was the first reveal. It was not the final payoff. Outside the courtroom, Evan tried to leave with Caleb. Detectives stopped them in the hall. He was not arrested that morning. Their phones were secured through procedures handled by counsel, and both men were asked to sit for interviews. Peter Laird withdrew from representing Evan before lunch. By 4 o'clock, my son had already sent me 3 different explanations through another attorney. First, Caleb handled the documents. Second, Evan believed I was missing and probably dead. Third, he had only been trying to protect the properties from tax problems. I forwarded every message to Elena. She called me. Do not answer him. I wasn't planning to. Good, he's still talking. That was the counterattack, if you can call it that. Evan was doing what he had always done. He was searching for an explanation large enough to stand between him and the consequences. The next morning, Raymond and 2 officers went with me to my house. The locks had been changed. Once inside, I found cardboard boxes labeled for auction. Laura's china was wrapped in newspaper. My clothes had been separated into donation bags. Family photographs were stacked on the dining table. My bedroom drawers were open. The mattress had been lifted. Lily's framed school photograph was face down on the carpet. The safe was gone. But what stopped me were the yellow tags. Each piece of furniture had a number. The piano, $1,200. The dining set, $800. My tools, $3,000 for the lot. Laura's sewing cabinet, $150. I removed the tags one at a time. At 4 that afternoon, Nicole brought Lily. We did not surprise her. A child counselor spoke with her first and explained that the information about my death had been wrong. Then I walked into the room. She stared at me. Grandpa? Hi, sweetheart. She did not move at first. Then she ran so quickly the chair behind her fell over. She held me around the waist and started crying. Are you really here? I'm here. Dad said you were gone. I know. Why did he say that? That question was harder than anything the judge had asked me. I don't know how to explain all of it yet. Did you leave us? No. Did you know I thought you were dead? I swallowed. Not until 2 days ago. She pressed her face against my jacket again. That was the true cost of Evan's plan. Not the apartment building, not the missing cash. A 10-year-old child had mourned a living grandfather because her father needed a signature to become real. That night, Evan called from his attorney's office. I answered once. Dad, please, just listen. You have 5 minutes. This got out of control. Did you file the will? Caleb prepared most of it. Did you tell the judge you watched me sign it? Silence. I thought the document was legitimate. You told the judge you were there. Dad, I was under pressure. From whom? Our investors. The business was collapsing. Caleb said if we didn't move fast, everything was gone. So you killed me on paper. That's not what happened. Then tell me what happened. Another silence. He changed direction. I thought you were missing. Your phone was gone. Your wallet was stolen. You transferred my phone number. I was trying to protect your accounts. You changed the utilities at my house into your name. I thought someone had to manage things. You held my memorial. His breathing changed. Dad, you have used 4 explanations in less than 24 hours. I can fix this. No. You can explain it to your attorney. I ended the call. For the first time in Evan's life, I did not stay on the phone long enough to help him build a 5th explanation. The investigation uncovered the rest in layers. That is important, because the courtroom was not the biggest twist. At first, investigators believed the scheme was mainly about inheritance. Then they opened Ridgway's financial records. Evan and Caleb were in serious debt. They had purchased 2 buildings with variable rate loans and private investor money. Renovation costs had gone over budget. Occupancy dropped. Caleb had moved escrow funds to cover loan payments. There was a hole in the business. My apartment building was supposed to fill it. If Ridgeway Urban Holdings bought my building for $520,000, they planned to refinance it near its real market value. That new loan would repay angry investors and replace missing escrow money. Then they would raise rents. My commercial workshops were next. My house would secure another loan. They did not want one inheritance. They wanted a chain of collateral. And I was the one person who would never sign. So Evan solved the problem by removing me. Investigators also traced the false death record. The original belonged to another American with a similar name who had died in Spain several years earlier. The details had been altered and attached to a translation. The seal was convincing enough in a scanned filing. It was never meant to survive careful examination. It only needed to survive long enough. That phrase appeared in one of Caleb's messages. Long enough. The plan depended on speed. The obituary created public belief. The memorial created witnesses who believed I was dead. The forged will created authority. The emergency sale moved the building. By the time anyone challenged the records, the money would have been scattered through debt, investors, and related companies. Caleb cooperated first. His lawyer arranged a meeting with prosecutors. He gave them messages, draft documents, financial files, and the laptop used for part of the scheme. One message read, "He'll never sell while he's breathing," another said. "The trip is the perfect window. Nobody knows exactly where he is." 3 days before my memorial, Caleb asked what would happen if I came home early. Evan replied, "By the time he knows, the building won't be his problem anymore." Elena printed that message and placed it on the table in front of me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "This takes away most of his innocent explanation defense." I nodded. But prosecutors still had one problem. Evan's new attorney argued that Caleb had designed the fraud. He claimed some messages were jokes. He challenged the handling of electronic evidence. He suggested my son had panicked after losing contact with me and then followed bad advice. It was ugly. It was also predictable. Then Judith remembered the memorial had been recorded. The funeral home had saved a digital copy. That recording became the final reveal. I watched it in Elena's office. 31 people sat facing a photograph of me. Evan stood at the front in a dark suit. He looked tired. He looked sad. He looked convincing. Then he described my final conversation. "I told Dad I loved him," he said on the recording. "He told me not to be afraid." I had never said that. "He asked me to look after Lily." I had never made that call. "He told me the properties were my responsibility now." He said I would know what to do. There it was. My son had not merely accepted a false document. He had written my final words. He had used a room full of grieving relatives to establish a story that gave him moral permission to control my property. His attorney watched the video once, then again. The next week, he requested a plea conference. The criminal charges included attempted theft, forgery, perjury, identity theft, unlawful computer access, and conspiracy. The exact list changed as lawyers argued about overlapping counts and jurisdictions. I stopped caring about labels. What mattered was that Evan could no longer pretend this was one bad decision. It was a sequence. He had asked for my itinerary, taken control of my phone, accessed my email, used an old will, filed a false death record, held a memorial, invented my last words, entered my house, removed property, and stood under oath telling a judge he had watched me sign a document I had never seen. That was not panic. That was a plan. While the criminal case moved forward, I dealt with my life. Restoring a legal identity turned out to be harder than I expected. My bank wanted certified court papers. My pension office required its own review. My health insurer had me listed as deceased. A pharmacy refused to fill a prescription because its system said I was dead. The clerk looked at me, then at the screen. "I'm sorry, sir. It says you're deceased." I stared at her. I can see why that would be confusing. She did not laugh. Neither did I. Death is easy for a database to accept. Being alive required paperwork. At home, I changed every lock and password. I removed Evan from the phone account, emergency contacts, medical permissions, mail access, and insurance records. I froze my credit. Raymond placed additional alerts on the property titles. Then I rewrote the estate plan. Evan was removed as a beneficiary. Not reduced, removed. The apartment building went into a protected trust for Lily, administered independently until she was 35. Existing long-term tenants could remain under controlled rent increases. The building could not be pledged for Evan's debts. The commercial workshops funded apprenticeship scholarships for young electricians. Laura had always believed skilled work could change a person's life because it had changed mine. The house would remain mine for life, then pass into Lily's trust. Evan would have no right to occupy it, borrow against it, manage it, or force its sale. My son had tried to concentrate everything in himself. The final documents did the opposite. Most of Laura's jewelry was recovered from a dealer before it was sold. My tools came back from Caleb's warehouse. The coin collection was traced to a buyer, though several pieces were never found. The firearms were recovered from a storage unit. The emergency cash was gone. Elena told me where part of it went. "You're not going to like this. I haven't liked much lately." "He used some of your cash to pay the funeral home." I looked at her. "My own memorial?" "Yes." For the first time since Porto, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes the body does not know what else to do. My son had used my money to convince people I was dead. The funeral director came to see me personally. He apologized and offered to remove the obituary. I told him not to. Correct it. "Mr. Mercer? Leave the original notice. Add a correction above it." I wanted anyone who searched my name to see both versions. The lie, and the fact that I had outlived it. The criminal case took 11 months. Caleb pleaded first and cooperated. Ridgeway collapsed. Its 2 leveraged properties entered foreclosure. Investors sued. Evan initially insisted on going to trial. His attorney challenged searches and electronic records. He argued Caleb had manipulated him. He said financial fear had distorted Evan's judgment. Then the memorial recording surfaced. A week later, Evan changed his plea. At sentencing, the judge asked whether I wanted to speak. I wrote 3 versions of what I might say. The first was angry. The second tried too hard to forgive. The third was shorter. That was the one I read. I stood and looked at the judge, not at Evan. The property is not the worst thing my son tried to take. The courtroom was quiet. He used the legal system to remove my identity. He turned my sister's grief into evidence for a lie. He made his own daughter mourn a grandfather who was still alive. I paused. This was not one desperate decision. He planned it, repeated it, and then confirmed it under oath. I did not ask for the maximum sentence. I did not ask for mercy either. I hope my son eventually becomes a man who can live without treating other people as obstacles. But hope is not a substitute for accountability. Then I sat down. Evan read a statement prepared with his attorney. He apologized to Judith. He apologized to Lily. Then he looked at me. "Dad, I know sorry isn't enough." I said nothing. I was terrified of losing everything. That sentence stayed with me. Everything. He had been afraid of losing a failing business, so he had tried to take my house, my income, my identity, and years of Lily's future. The judge sentenced him to 4.5 to 9 years in state prison, followed by probation and restitution. Some relatives thought it was too severe. Others thought it was too light. I stopped measuring. A sentence was never going to balance what happened. It simply placed a boundary where our family had failed to place one for years. Late rent had become a rescue. Tax debt had become a misunderstanding. Bad business decisions had become someone else's fault. Laura and I had softened consequences so often that Evan eventually believed consequences themselves were negotiable. The court disagreed. But the story did not end when Evan went to prison. Lily did not attend sentencing. Nicole protected her from most of the public details, but children hear things anyway. One afternoon, another student showed her a news article about her father. She came home angry with me. "You sent Dad to prison." I sat across from her at Nicole's kitchen table. "No. Everyone says you testified against him." I told the truth about what happened. Same thing. "No, sweetheart. Prosecutors brought the case. A judge gave the sentence. Your father made the choices." Her eyes filled. "You hate him." "I don't." "Then why didn't you help him?" "Because I had helped him too many times." I did not say that. Instead, I said, "You are allowed to love your father and love me at the same time." She did not speak to me for weeks. Our Sunday breakfast stopped. That hurt more than I expected. I accepted it. If I demanded that Lily understand me immediately, I would be doing another version of what Evan had done, treating her feelings as something that should serve my needs. Months later, she called. "Can I see the apartment building?" "Of course." We walked through the basement and a vacant unit being repainted. I showed her the electrical panel I had replaced years earlier. I explained how rent paid taxes, insurance, repairs, and the trust that would one day support her. She stood by a second-floor window. "Dad wanted to sell this?" "Yes." Did he know it was for me? He knew I had plans for you. He didn't know every detail. She looked outside. Then she asked, if he had won, could you have come home? I had spent months avoiding that question. I don't know. She turned toward me. That answer changed something. For the first time, she understood her father's plan was not simply a fight over inheritance. He had been willing to leave me legally dead while I was alive in another country. Our breakfast started again. A year after sentencing, I visited Evan once. The prison was 2 hours away. He entered the visiting room wearing state-issued clothes and sat across from me. Without the expensive shoes, trimmed beard, and phone constantly lighting up, he looked younger and older at the same time. He asked about Lily. I gave him the updates Nicole had approved. Then he asked about the properties. They're secure, I said. Am I still in the will? No, he looked down. I figured, for once, he did not argue. Then he asked, can you ever forgive me? I had thought about that question for months. Maybe. His eyes lifted. But forgiveness will not put you back in the estate. His face changed slightly. It won't give you access to my accounts. It won't make me responsible for your housing when you get out. It won't erase what happened. So what would forgiveness even mean? It would mean I don't spend the rest of my life hating you. He leaned back. That's it? That's a lot. He was disappointed. I realized he still imagined forgiveness as a door. For me, it was not. I could stop standing outside the prison in my own mind without handing him the keys to my house. After that visit, Evan began writing letters. The early ones sounded like legal arguments: debt, pressure, Caleb, grief, fear of failure. I read them and did not respond. Months later, one letter was different. He wrote about the memorial. He said that while standing in front of the family, part of him had begun to believe the story he was telling. A dead father could not refuse him. A dead father could not question his plans. A dead father could be praised in public and controlled in private. Then he wrote one sentence that finally sounded honest. I stopped seeing you as a person with a life left to live. I answered that letter. 1 page. I told him honesty did not earn a reward, but it was the first useful thing he had sent me. We exchanged a few letters each year after that. I did not send large amounts of money. I did not call officials asking for early release. I did not promise him a job. When relatives told me I should prepare a room for him, I said the same thing every time. You are free to help Evan. I am free not to put the person who victimized me back in control of my life. Judith understood. Attending a memorial for a living brother had changed her too. We became closer. Every Wednesday she came to the house for dinner. We talked about books, tenants, travel, and ordinary things. That mattered. Life after betrayal should contain ordinary things. 2 years after the hearing, I returned to Porto. I found the same cafe beside the river and sat under the same striped awning. The waiter did not remember me. I opened the corrected obituary on my phone. For a long time I had kept it bookmarked. I read it once, then I deleted the bookmark. I did not need to keep proving I was alive. I spent another month traveling and mailed Lily postcards from every city. When I returned to Pennsylvania, we held the first scholarship ceremony at the commercial workshops. The recipient was a 20-year-old apprentice named Marcus. The scholarship paid for tools, licensing fees, and night classes. Standing there, I understood what I wanted my property to do after me. Evan had seen inheritance as property moving toward him. I wanted it to move outward. The apartment building would protect Lily. The workshops would help young tradespeople build careers. The house would remain a home. The plan my son tried to create ended up producing the exact opposite result. He tried to put everything under his control. I put it beyond his reach. He tried to erase my intentions. I placed them in documents no one person could change. He tried to turn my death into an opportunity. I used my remaining life to create opportunities for other people. 5 years and 3 months after he entered prison, Evan was released on parole. Lily was 16. Nicole arranged limited contact between them with a counselor. I stayed out of their first meeting. Evan moved into transitional housing and found work maintaining electrical equipment at a packaging plant. The job did not come from me. 6 months later, he asked if I would meet him. We chose a public park. He arrived before I did. That alone was new. We walked for 20 minutes. He did not bring a business proposal. He did not ask about inheritance. He did not explain why life had been unfair to him. Near the parking lot, he said, I know I'm not getting the properties. You're not. I know. He looked ahead. I don't want to talk about money. Good. Then he asked about my health and listened to the answer. When we reached my truck, He said, "Thank you for coming." He did not remind me that he was my son. He did not ask what I owed him. That restraint was the first evidence of change. Evidence is not proof. I agreed to meet him again 3 months later. That is where our relationship stands now. A walk, an occasional letter, a supervised meal with Lily. No promises about what comes next. I no longer build the future from hope alone. There is one object from the whole experience that I kept: the program from my memorial. It sits on a shelf in my study. The cover shows my name, the false date of death, and the photograph with Laura cropped out. Inside is Evan's paragraph about my integrity. Behind it, I placed a certified copy of the court order dismissing the estate petition because I appeared in person. I do not keep it because I want to hate my son. I keep it because for 11 days, paperwork convinced people I no longer existed. An obituary, a signature, a seal, a room full of grieving relatives. Evan thought if enough pieces of paper repeated the same lie, the lie would become more real than the man. For 11 days, it almost did. But then he walked into court carrying a forged will, and I walked in carrying the one thing he could not forge: myself. I did not raise my voice. I did not need a speech. I simply stood where a dead man was not supposed to stand. That was enough. If someone you love has ever mistaken your kindness for permission, remember this: love does not require you to surrender the right to protect your own life. And sometimes the strongest answer is not revenge. It is making sure the person who tried to erase your future never gets to write it for you again. If you've ever had someone in your own family mistake kindness for permission, tell me in the comments what boundary changed things for you. And if you like stories about ordinary people who stop being underestimated, subscribe for the next one.